Team Naventic has one game left to try to turn things around against the beast that is Tempo Storm. Can they do it?
You know, it's probably
mean
not.
question
Probably not.
to make you answer.
Yeah, it is a mean question to make me answer because, you know, I'm terrible at lying, and I'm just going to throw out my honest answer. Probably not is where I would leave that. Maybe one game, and that's about as far as I put it. Like, and again, it's going to be relying on just some kind of major draft adjustment. If it happens, I feel like it's Naventic going with that heavy, like the random all rack we saw in the last game, maybe like more offensive weird picks like that, and then just snowballing a game out of control.
Well, let's see where that game's going to be, where the draft might have to come in for them. There it is. That's Warhead.
Double boss.
Tempo favorite.
Yeah, we're going.
Apparently.
Warhead only, man. I'm telling you, it's Kirsten and Warhead has been their pattern so far. And you know, it's so strange to see that from them. They heavily concentrate on one lane with one of the bosses, and that's typically where Tempo Storm looks to try and end the game a little bit earlier than you are used to on your Warhead Junction, but that is really the kind of go-to play they've seen from them. Still yet to totally understand if they... I just can't get over
this
your
music is just groovy.
Groovy is the word we're
kind
going
of
for?
forgotten about the Murica music.
It's Murica's fireworks?
Listen to that guitar riff.
Yeah. I just see Gilly up there with a whammy, just like,
headbanging.
Yeah.
And then I break the headset
and then you go
and
ahead
I'm in
for
trouble.
you go for the stage dive, and it's more like a stage flop, and you're just on the ground. Everybody sad.
Looks at me.
It's like, that girl got way too confident, way too fast.
I would do that. Right off the casting desk. Let's go, Warhead.
We're about to. We're about to. We're just waiting. Apparently, we had a small mini here. Zuna's trying to restart his computer, struggling a bit. That is why we've had some of these pauses. We're just waiting for that, and then Warhead draft's going to kick off.
Globals.
Globals.
Illidan.
Task Tracer. Turns out a lot of the heroes that are good on big maps are still good on another big map. The only variable different would be maybe Globals get a little bit more because the split pressure of the objective, but how Tempo's been playing it, they kind of abuse the fact that like globals aren't important because the game doesn't hit the point of the time where globals are needed to be effective.
I got a question.
Hit me with it.
When do we start seeing some Vikings?
I don't think Tempo's the team to bust that out.
I know.
You know, and that's the one weird thing about North America that I've always found so interesting. Since the beginning of like just competitive scenes, North America, if it's not we haven't had in the past, we've had times where we're willing to bust out the Vikings and Abathurs and things like that. But Europe, man, has always like had the moment where it's just like, you know, we're busting out the Vikings. That one team, a group of players where they always are comfortable with that weird strategy, but we almost never have that in NA. Like maybe Gale Force time to time, and then maybe Superstars, but that's looking like a year ago. And then since then, it's just been dead.
Well, Hasuabs, the premier Vikings player for Europe, used to be a StarCraft player professionally.
Yeah.
We have Cawthon.
Where you at, Cawthon? This is
Let's
on you.
go.
You had
this
one
game.
job. One job.
Actually, we have had one Vikings in Phase 2.
Gale Force. Or in Phase 2. No, tomorrow, yeah. Yeah, we had Gale Force in Phase 1 on Braxis was the first time we saw that with the old school Morales Zul Jin strategy. They busted out. Didn't look too hot, and the first time that we actually saw that coming up from them, I believe they even lost that game. And then we got the one out of No Tomorrow. That did work. No, it didn't. Vikings, that's why we don't play Vikings. We just don't win with them. And you can't forget,
fair point.
Even though Team Liquid of modern day has Hasuabs to be that expert, you know, you every time I look at EU, especially now that he's back in HGC Europe, it's Shad. Man. He is the Vikings king of EU. He Vikings on every map, no matter the circumstances. He was like, yeah, we can Vikings here. Yeah, we can Vikings here. And that was the older iteration of Team Liquid. Yeah. You know, I gained like so much respect for him when I started like looking at some of it, like specifically his Eric build on Sky Tempo. When I started realizing Eric can solo a shrine as long as Eric's just queuing, running in circles, I was like, this guy is a madman. He's a genius.
Well, no Vikings. We'll probably have just about every global in the books, though.
Yeah.
I think we're ready to do it. We're going in. Draft number 3 between Naventic and Tempo on Warhead Junction.
This is one of the moments that I don't mind seeing Naventic commit to those globals because it is that impactful on a map like this. And they should be able to stall out the game, avoid Tempo snowballing one of the boss lanes. Man.
No change. stalwart banners of Genji are Team Naventic.
It's really sad, honestly. I can understand it. It's just really sad whenever we see a team that feels like they aren't comfortable just like letting that type of hero go through, especially one as core to the meta. But again,
especially with a Biggie and iDream on the team.
Yeah, it does seem very confusing. And I mean, even Zuna, you know, I mean, he is on that kind of side off role, but they have so many players I feel like could get away with it. But something just within their ideology and philosophy and how to approach it just says we don't feel comfortable with it, and they will permanently removed. But again, I do want to note that we have seen this in the past in the world, and it's won within regions. The best team within Europe did that for a long time, and that being Team Dig with Illidan, just didn't have an Illidan player. And for, I'm going to say it was almost 3 to 4 months straight, they banned it no matter what, and still was at the top of their region. So it's not impossible. It's just a huge setback.
Yeah, you have to know that that's your ban no matter what position you're in. Because everyone else, it was only in the second pick position where if you did not want to let the other team first pick it, you had to ban it. But Dignitas, whatever position it was in, it was just like,
first pick,
no
second
Illidan.
pick, doesn't matter. It's a map where it's not even that viable, doesn't matter. We can't play it. We aren't going to risk that your opponent can play it.
Tassadar's up. Does Team Naventic want a Tass for later on? Something like a Tass Illidan, Tass Tracer? Because Dahaka was banned, so there's no Dahaka available.
I don't know, honestly. Naventic, the direction that they want to move, their priority has changed quite a bit. You can tell that they are still trying to figure out what they want to move. I wouldn't be surprised if they just kind of go with something we haven't seen before. I mean, they're like, this series is down to this game at this point in time. You might as well get a little weird with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's Warhead, too. It's a map that you can justify getting a little bit weird with it. You know, Tempo's the only one who's really forcing people's hands and to be able to play on this map unless they're comfortable dropping the ban. I want the Tass, or I want it to be just not a noob. I want Tass or something really kind of...
Yeah, it's gotta be Tass.
Yeah, set me off onto something a little bit weirder.
So now Tempo has the opportunity to get Abathur if they want Abathur. Again for Cawthon. A noob Barak, though, is still there. Is it a noob Uther again? It's a noob Uther again.
Sticking to a bit more meta-slave-ish. I would be interesting to know, now after the series, do you know specifically how much Tempo and Team Freedom scrim? Do you feel like it's very much?
I don't know how much.
I don't know specifically those two either, but I do feel like they both show drafting trends of that kind of top half is very meta-slave, or the back half is a little bit less. It's not as consistent as Team Freedom, but it's something you keep in mind, and we'll see if they keep up that kind of trend moving forward. Just with the Uther and Noob, it seems a little bit less tempo, you know? Yeah, that's part of their changes to go that consistent with that rotation, even on a map like Warhead.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is the Uther, they just feel is so objectively strong. So take Uther away, and a noob flexes to where Cattle and Fury can both play it, and that is a thing that we know of Tempo Storm, where they high up will pick something where multiple members can play it, like a Li Ming or like a Greymane.
Ario is going to be that pick there for Naventic. I thought it was going to either be the Illidan or we would see the Abathur pick up there. I would have adored an Abathur rotation there, because one of the cool things about Abathur is you don't always have to have the hyper carry. We see it almost always, and I'm surprised we don't see other teams venturing. It's just like, Abathur's pretty dope as long as you have a good hat target. You know, you don't need anything too wild. Arthas is one of the best hat targets in the game. Then you can force an Illidan ban later on, or fear of the Illidan manipulation. Now this commits very much to, we know what we can expect from Naventic. The Illidan is still a bit of a concern, but maybe not quite as much. Because again, Tempo has 2 more picks that they get to deny a little bit more.
Do you feel like Team Naventic would have been okay to have both Tassadar and Abathur if... Are there a lot of heroes that can kind of be the one true damage dealer within that?
Within just if you
having both a Tass and an Abathur on the same team.
And not having an Illidan, like with it, I think it's, as long as you have a different one, and Arthas is that hat target. Okay. That's what I failed to make clear, sorry. Is that, yes, you can get away with that because Arthas on his own is such a good hat target and such a good clone target. You don't need that, like, always kill your backline type hero. You just need to be, you know, something a little bit more... it's something that can stay on top of opponents, likes to trade for long periods of time, and doesn't need... The most important thing, they need to be good without talents. That is it. If their base kit is effective and didn't need a talent to be relevant, they're a good hat. Every single time.
Tempo Storm feels like the Cassia would be a very strong pick to go along with the Tassadar and the Ariel. And then Team Naventic, now not wanting to deal with Abathur for Tempo Storm. Nobody committing at all to global so far, despite what we talked about so much for Warhead Junction.
Well, the Dahaka was banned early on, and that got removed. Then the Abathur was banned on the second ban phase, right? And it's not impossible to see the faucet picked up somewhere. It's just not sitting at number 1 and 2 rotation, which, again, Tempo doesn't play the map necessarily that way. And then because the Dahaka was banned, that's the only one we can assume Naventic would pick that high up, really. So, you know, it's one of those, like, you're right, but you're also, like, I feel like it's kind of just how this draft specifically has played out.
Yeah, I guess seeing the, what I mean by that is not seeing, or seeing the Dahaka ban, nobody panicked into, I need to get full stat, I need to get something to make sure that I still have a global for this very large battleground.
Yeah, not nearly as focused on that.
Next 2 picks, Illidan still up, not able to pair with Abathur, no Abathur Greymane. But there's also Tracer, or both.
That last pick has to be, it doesn't have to be, but I expect it to be something with a bit more offense and lockdown, a more reliable hard initiation. Like the first thing that comes to mind is Tyrael, but then you have no damage. Like you're very linear in how you have to approach team fights.
So they're keeping away. Naventic definitely wants something to go with the Ariel Tassadar as far as a Valla, a Lunara, maybe a Zul'jin, but to add to that, the possibility of having an Illidan behind that would be a nice pairing. Tracer too. So Naventic are taking, or Tempo are taking away the second half of that equation.
Yeah.
There'll still be somebody for a battery.
Man. Yeah, they're taking away both of them. It's just now where do we want to see Naventic move and what can deal with that type of damage? Like I've got in my head, but it's nowhere near where I think Naventic would actually go. So for them specifically to recover from this position, I have no idea where they're going to go. What do we see here? Lunara, Chen? Lunara, Chen. Okay. I didn't think the Chen would show up. I thought the Lunara for the best battery source, but not that as a melee to be the Chen. Because, man, this is such a weird... You know when you like feel like you're trying to explain something to the audience, so you always say generally this is the one rule that you need, but then there's more than that. But you never feel like you need to break them all down. Chen pick there was like the exact moment where it's like, now I need to really explain what you actually need in depth with Chen. Do you see any like major hole at first glance on like the Chen? You normally are like, well, I need no CC. A Nubarak Uther is a pretty solid amount onto the front line, but there's another reason why you pick Chen, and it's typically to either trade well into things like the Tracer, but what I'm afraid of is what if people stop caring about the Chen here? Like, I see the thought process of behind it, but Chen sucks when you ignore him. Like, when you just don't ignore him, and when you have a Noob, a Tracer, and an Illidan, who's going to take the time to worry about the Panda brewing on the backside? You're just going to dive past, and you're going to kill him. So he has a... Or not him, excuse me, somebody else, somebody more relevant.
Ariel.
Yeah, so now that puts a huge role of responsibility to Chen to be a big force, to need to be paid attention to put himself into very risky situations that you have to attend to him, but commit too many resources on top of it, but not have him actually get picked off. It's a little weird.
It is. Leeming, to round things out, both the drafts are a little bit weird. Tempo Storm has Tracer and Illidan together, and then they have Leeming. So a lot of damage dealers, but not as much the traditional draft that we would expect from them. I do kind of like the Leeming, though, coming in, because Chen has the ability at level 1 to either pick Grounding Brew as a way of dealing with spell damage, or Elusive Brawler as a way of dealing with auto attack damage. And so in this way, he can't pick both now. Leeming or Tracer, Illidan, somebody is going to be able to get the damage in against him.
I want to see Arthas flanks this game, much like into the last. It's a little bit different than normal, where it's like, no, not approaching left or right because the Arthas needs to be attended to. It's more that you want Chen to be paid attention to as much as you possibly can in this type of game. So Arthas flanking and creating problems once you open onto the Chen is going to be huge. But again, I'm going to be honest, our Arthas flanks are not very common in North America. Like, it's Arthas isn't played very much different than traditional Murden most of the time, so I don't know if I can expect that from Naventic, but I would love to see that because Chen needs to be a problem in this game, and if he's not, it's just like, well, there's another person dead on the backside. Oh, there's another person dead, and it's just diving, diving, diving all over from Tempo.
There's another thing I want to talk about for Chen specifically with the combo that Naventic has, but let's get into the game first. See if this Chen Lunara composition can net Naventic a win in this best of 5. I'm talking about Donkey Kong build, his keg build, versus the flying kick build for damage. He already has so many slows on his team because of Lunara, because of Arthas. There's already so many slows. So they could take it the approach of going for the keg build and add unfair advantage to that. And then Lunara is just, she's going to shred everybody because she will have so much damage thanks to the constant slows, or because the slows should theoretically already be there from Lunara. And Arthas, if he's flanking in and hits a lot of the members, maybe this is a time where we will see that flying kick build that Reset used so much at the midseason brawl.
Flying kick build would better enable the 1v1 trading into squishy backliners that could argue it needs enough to draw aggro. But I can see an argument that Donkey Kong build would slow enough targets that you would have to start paying attention to the Chen. That instead of drawing resources through actual damage source and saying you have to kill me or I'm going to kill you, it's doing it through the lack of mobility, and that he is such a big problem up there throwing barrel on barrel on barrel that you cannot let him, you can't move past him. And between that and the Arthas, I can see you making an argument that it's like, that's worth it. So I can see both directions.
So can I.
I don't know if I even actually have a strong opinion one way or the other. Chen is a hero. Honestly, I'm not a Chen main. I've played both builds enough to be like, I know what is good, I know where it's bad. But in terms of can that draw enough aggro into such a squishy backline, my first thought is flying kick build does make the most amount of sense. Killing someone almost always draws their attention faster than slowing them down.
Yeah, I'm excited to see which method, which route we see Zuna go with his Chen build. Especially because there's even slows from Tassadar too, from his distortion beam. He can increase that too with some talents later on. Psalm's going after Zuna.
That was a really nice flying kick.
We got to see some stats specifically on Big Impact. Lunara is a really good pick for Big Impact, which is why I'm surprised that it's taken us till Game 3 to be able to see him play this hero.
I just want to say I completely agree with every ounce of the last tweet. It just said, Saturdays are meant for burritos and HGC.
Yes.
On the same page
100% yes.
My biggest problem? Lack of burritos.
Yeah.
Where's that at?
Where's our burritos? Where's the HGC burritos?
I'm good on the HGC side, but burrito game? Weak. I'm burrito-less almost every weekend, you know?
And that is a sad state of affairs to be burrito-less.
Yeah, so is Zuna's sad state of affairs there up at the top. The parting gift was all it took to make sure they get the final kill here. The trade has been beneficial for Tempo, not so much for Naventic as you see them struggling to secure the fort there for bottom, but they're going to get it eventually.
Nukes have been picked up, and Tempo Storm doing what they love to do on Warhead Junction, which is to take that nuke directly to a lane where they've already taken a fort down and shoot it at some of the structures in that lane. Later on, being able to get the boss in this lane, this top lane will be a constant bruise for Naventic now that Tempo Storm has found an opening.
Yeah, and if anybody at home may not know, the scaling of the turrets and all the forts are very, very different. So taking those keep turrets like that in experience is worth a lot more than taking a fort turret here or there. The front wall of the keep is not equal, not even close to equal to the front wall of the fort. So seeing that early pressure right there is so very good. And that's what I had a little bit of criticism towards some of the teams we saw playing yesterday with the early game decisions. It was rather than taking a keep front wall, it's like looking towards the boss. And I like the tempo. I mean, obviously with this spike, they weren't going to question that, but that they're already thinking about how do we open up the win condition. And that's kind of their Warhead strat. It's part of the reason I think nobody's willing to like play with them too much on this map is because they just all in one lane. And then it hits the point where it's like boss is going to be a problem and we have the Illidan. What are you going to really do?
And look at the experience advantage they've already amassed, sitting at just now getting their level 7. When the next Warhead phase comes around, if they continue to have an advantage and have 2 to 3 of the Warheads that spawn in that phase, they can either use those to try to get the boss or use those along with the boss and get an extremely early keep off of it.
Right. Oh man, Suna. He's still willing to dabble in this lane. He's got Arthas behind him, so it looks like they're going to try and move up. But even then, I don't know if Arthas is enough to be that intimidating. You see Beakhead, he's like, you know, I don't know if we really can get away with this that well. As Cattle still's been going around shooting things as fast as he possibly can on the Tracer. Even looping around here. iDream isn't, like, the reason Tempo's camping or wants to try and get the pressure around iDream like that is, like, he's the one with the actual missile, right? Trying to pressure him is the best. But it's a Tassadar.
Missile. Shielded.
A Howling Blast landed. The Detainment Strike did not, though. If it waited half a second, could have done it onto the fort. Maybe enough to get the kill.
Still slows. Poisons, really, on top of Salmon. Big Impact's coming in, trying to get that kill, their first kill of the game. But with an orb, Leeming scares away the rest of Team Naventic. Looking at the talents that we have so far, we do have one. We've got Deadly Strike at level 4, Flying Kick build. Splintered Spear, of course. And Holy Shock with the Holy Light build for Uther. So June going for more of the Holy Light, Holy Shock that we occasionally see from him, I think, specifically.
Yeah, and it's when we see it is when they build a comp that is never wants to be the ones responding to a fight being started. They're just going, yes, we want to start this fight, and yes, we are going to end it as soon as possible. And imagine that with an Illidan Tracer Li Ming. I'm not surprised to see that coming out from June.
Yeah, Li Ming even got Charged Blast, too, just trying to add that single target damage. 3 of the nukes picked up in that last phase from Tempo Storm. Team Naventic got 1, along with the one that they had before, and are starting the boss in the bottom.
Worth. Nobody got the punishment. Boss is now started. Tempo knows they're closing in on 10. Naventic has the all in right now or walk away completely, and their body language is indicating they want nothing to do with it there. Just Tempo is way too close to 10. And now is when Illidan starts the boss. Imagine that. And here's the early keep, and then they're going to win the game with the 10 spike, or they're going to wipe onto the core. There's no mule on the other side of the table. All right, to be fair, Tempo, I've never seen them actually all in the core this early. I've only seen them do this strategy with the intent to get the keep. But this is no surprise. Naventic, if they've ever seen this, ever seen Tempo post-mid-season Brawl play this map, they should be assuming they're 100% on that boss.
Yeah, and they're trying to get at least a boss of their own, but what they need to make sure that they're doing is trying to get heroic abilities at the same time. They've got Chen in mid trying to soak that lane, but Tempo Storm gets the boss very quickly. They're heading down. Tracer already drops 1 nuke.
They're looking ahead. No, they aren't. I don't know. That nuke that early on, it's the keep is going to die no matter what. Yeah, they're going to try here. So they have 1 nuke and 10 advantages dying out. I don't know if they have it, but again, even if they wipe on the core here, this is a worth trade for Tempo Storm.
Naventic has 2 nukes that they can try to drop down and burn down the boss as fast as possible. Big Impact goes down with the Pulse Bomb, though. That's 1. Cocoon on one of the targets, Tomster. Considering, yeah, throwing out that nuke, there'll be some damage. The core already down to 80% as Tempo Storm pushes on. They have Illidan on top of the core. Tassadar shielding, hoping to slow things down, but that is just not enough. 7 minutes and 16 seconds. Tempo Storm wins.
Yeah, and now you know why Tempo enjoys the Warhead Junction. Again, it's just cycling through one map and then waiting, or one side of the map waiting for the boss. And then they always get a keep at that point. And conveniently, with an Illidan comp and the 10 spike still being unobtained by your opponents, it's enough to be able to end the game, even very early on.
I think that's the fastest they've done it yet.
Yes, it is. It's the first time that like all the stars aligned, right? Not just half of them there. It's all about the 10 spike on whether or not that lethal's worth. And even with Naventic getting it, the reason I said wiping on the core there is worth it is as long as you know there is going to be no mule on a map like that, it's only a matter of time before the catapults become a problem. And when the catapults become a problem and the shielding on the core is already down to 20%, your opponent can't leave. You just manipulate the map so heavily. It's just if the underdog experience is enough to give them too big of a lead, and that wasn't the case there. So I like that call from Tempo, and they didn't even need to risk anything.
And nukes are pretty good at being able to drop down a core health. So even, again, had they lost there, they died on top of the core, they could have come back in with nukes in the next phase.
Yeah, it's just a million ways to play it, and doesn't matter. Tempo with a clean 7-minute, 7:16 is where we ended that one.
So Tempo Storm get the 3-0, very important to them. Team Naventic had to be expecting probably a loss here. Yes, Tempo Storm has been going through some things, but they're still Tempo Storm.
Yeah, it's still Tempo and still just about the improvement of Naventic if they're able to get enough fast enough, and it's a huge gap still between. It feels like we're almost getting a little bit more of one. I don't know. Maybe that's unfair to say. I'm underestimating some of the teams that we have. But it feels like, at least with Naventic and Even in Death, because Even in Death and, you know, obviously with the disbanding of BSEP, it just feels like those two teams are really struggling, and everybody else has a little bit of an idea of what they're trying to make happen. They aren't necessarily proud of the end product yet, but they're on the right direction, whereas Naventic is just clawing for like anything that sticks to feel like they can grow.
How do you feel Tempo Storm's chances are for the Western Clash still? They've gotten through a lot of the scary opponents. They haven't played Roll20 yet, but Roll20 is going through some changes of their own.
Tempo has... I have to think about exactly who they've beaten. Everybody they've beaten. They've beaten
Even in Death and now Naventic. They're at 2-2.
Even in Death and Naventic, and then they win.
They play Superstars on Sunday.
I mean, I would say definitely they got to feel confident into a team like Superstars. I feel like it's still pretty high for Tempo, honestly, but I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if you told me it was like that it didn't happen, just because some of those teams like Team Freedom, No Tomorrow, the results they've had, and then now the fact that like Roll20 and GFE, it's kind of like who actually belongs where. I wouldn't be totally surprised, because one of the teams with No Tomorrow success is out, and it's not Gale Force.
That is true.
So who is it?
Let's check in with Sam and see what he thinks about that victory, maybe even about how the team's feeling. Hey, Sam, congratulations. How are things going?
Hey, what's up, guys? Not the best.
Yeah?
Not the best.
Because of that series, or you guys' feelings toward Phase 2 specifically?
Our 2 losses. Yeah, not the best.
Yeah. Last weekend was a rough one.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah,
Talk to us a little bit about that. Do you feel like it was just hitting you guys at a hard time where you guys were working on some things internally for the team? Was it some surprise at how strong Gale Force and No Tomorrow were?
You know, I think our biggest problems in those games were our late game execution and closing out the games. So if you actually go back and analyze our matches versus both No Tomorrow and Gale Force, I think... And no disrespect to like Gale Force and No Tomorrow. They played very well and they won the series, obviously. But I feel like if we were able to execute correctly and close out the game, because we had pretty dominant leads, I think we could have 3-0'd both series. But we made the wrong decisions and we just broke apart. I don't know.
Does it feel like those changes that you're making, though, despite having those difficult losses, still overall are going to be better for the growth of the team? Because that's how it feels to us.
I think it's good having Cattle in the rotation. So it's not Cattle always on the main tank. As you just saw, he played the Tracer. But he's always going to be on a hero that's in the rotation. And half that, it's going to be him on the main tank, or half that he's just going to be on some kind of range that's in the rotation, and it's been working out.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. I'll let Dread ask you some questions now.
I mean, mine is just mainly about the sadness you got going on here, Salm. I mean, you know, last week maybe wasn't ideal, but I feel like you guys have all definitely shown, at least from our side, that you are looking to try and get that punishment. And I feel like everybody understood that fact that there was going to be moments where it's just kind of like, yeah, you know, that didn't go, the math didn't add up on this one. But you guys, even like we noted today, you immediately one-shot a Murden, killed him through 3 health bars because you just all in and opened up onto somebody. And I feel like we can see those positive changes, but it feels like you guys maybe struggle to really feel the same way.
I think after our 2 losses last weekend, a lot of people are sleeping on us now, but I still think that we're the best North American team. Obviously, you know, Twitch chat's going to flame me, and our record doesn't reflect that statement, but I think we're still capable of being at the top. And hopefully we can make it into the top 3 to get into Western Clash, but yeah, it's going to be a long uphill battle from here. Yeah.
We believe you can do it.
We do.
You are surprisingly down on yourself for being a team like Tempo Storm. I'm just saying it's a long battle, but I'm sure that is going to add up for you guys.
Yeah, what I'm going to need you to do, Sam, I'm going to need you to get the Mickey sheets back, get one of those kitten posters up on the wall that says "Hang in there," because we believe you guys are still Tempo Storm. You showed some fantastic games today, and we look forward to seeing you against Superstars on Sunday. Any shout-outs before we let you go?
Yeah, first of all, shout out to our team. Those losses last weekend were some of the hardest losses we've had to face, but we're sticking through it and we're working it out. And we came back today and we played some clean games, so that's really good. So shout out to them. Shout out to my family, girlfriend, friends. And of course, shout out to Tempo Storm for, still believing in us after some rough losses. And shout out to our sponsors, Secret Lab, Twitch, Mass Drop. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Good luck. Go ahead.
Shout out to SkyTech. I think that's a sponsor that we forgot. But yeah, shout out to SkyTech.
Gotta have the text file, Psalm, on the other monitor at all times.
Yeah.
No worries, no worries. Thanks again, Psalm. Congrats.
Thank you, guys.
Some humility there from Psalm, but like you said, they were difficult losses, especially because so many of those games, Tempo Storm were leading the charge, leading the games.
I wish I couldn't empathize with them, but I feel like I can heavily, like that mentality, because there's just so many problems that are small that can add up to really big things, and you're just constantly, like, everybody's just sitting there going, like, we all have one goal, and we all agree that this is the group of players we can try and make those things happen with, but for some reason it's just not. And the problem is huge and complex, and the solutions seem like they should be easy, but they never are, and so it feels like the sense of lost. Even though you're like, I like my team, I feel like we can't, like, you're just kind of lost because the solution is not going to land on your lap, and you've been working your butt off already, and you still can't find it. So it's just like, is this ever going to happen? And I can definitely feel his frustration and can relate to it.
Well, I hope they take this moment to celebrate being able to turn things around, at least get a victory. Yeah, it might have been an expected victory, but a victory nonetheless. And they can look forward to their series versus Superstars on Sunday. But we here at HGC can look forward to our next series, because up next we have Even in Death versus Roll20. We're going to a break. When we come back, we'll have that epic series. This is HGC.